I buy faulty electronic items, attempt to fix them and sell them for a profit. This right here is Sally's spectacular spreadsheet where I basically log and audit all of the profit or loss. The only update I have at the moment is that I managed to sell this Xbox One S as faulty for £21.54 after all of our fees, etc. And postage was £3.99. So effectively, we lost £2.45 on the Xbox One S. The PS5 from episode number 15 still hasn't sold. The controllers haven't sold yet, and neither has the Nintendo Switch. Hoping today for a nice, cushy little profit so we can get on our way back to our goal of £2,000 total profit. Welcome your faces to episode number 18, season 2 of the series Profit or Loss. Let's head on over to our first item. Oh! Stuck on safe boot screen and has no hard drive. So that is the fault that we have with this Xbox One S console. And I paid a grand total of £25 for this console, £15 for the console in question, and £10 postage. So I'm actually hoping that it's going to be a pretty easy one, especially if it hasn't got an actual hard drive in. Maybe all it needs is a hard drive, and then we can just do OSU and make a nice profit with this, hopefully. If this doesn't have a hard drive in, by the way, there is no point in me trying to actually turn it on. However, I will just kind of see, on that note, what the symptoms are if I do go to turn it on. Oh, that button feels really spongy. Well, it doesn't turn on. Okay, well, okay, there we go. So the actual button itself is broken, by the way. So we need to remember that and bear that in mind when I go to look inside the console, that this front button is broken. So technically, I believe this should just turn off if it doesn't have a hard drive in. But it might take a minute or so. So I'm just going to disconnect the power here, because I can't turn it off anyway with that power button. Right, I've just had the sync button fall off as well. This is not going good. Yeah, look. This is not going good. We can actually. So I've super glued one of these before, and I might do the same this time around. However, I could also just put a black casing on the bottom because the back of it is white anyway. So I don't think it's necessarily really going to matter. I think all I'm going to have to do then is just install a hard drive. Don't know whether that's going to fix our actual issue. I've got a 500 gig here, which is, I'm pretty happy just putting a 500 gig in rather than a 1 TB, to be honest. And then I'm pretty sure I got OSU downloaded recently, and it says Xbox here. So I'm hoping that is the situation. If not, then I've let myself down, essentially. I also need to check this drive, because if it's not a blank drive, which it's not going to be, is it? So I'm going to have to format this drive very quickly. Power on count, 5,000. Power on hours, 3,000. That's fine. Good. I'm okay with that. There's no yellow warning, anything like that. Health status is good. Right, let's go. CMD run as admin. Clean that bad boy. Successfully cleaned. Eject the Reno. And now we've got the Xbox OSU 1 on here. I'm going to plug this into the front of the Box X, and then we can put the drive back in the... Do you know what? No, we're not going to put the drive back in the chassis. And do you know why? Just in case something is wrong, I'll have a butcher's. And then once we've done what we need to do, I'll go ahead and put it back in the chassis. Let's plug in the power. And how's that button looking? Yeah, the button is gone. The button's gone from this front the daughter board, so I actually need to replace the daughter board. Could I desolder it and put a new button on? Of course I could. But I have about 364 of these daughter boards laying around. So I can just go ahead and replace it rather than mess about with soldering. It turns on, which is a good sign, by the way. Let me put the... I haven't got the overhead one on. It turns on. Like I said, it should. We should get an Xbox logo, a nice green... Okay, no, we shouldn't. This is perfect because the Xbox logo is software, isn't it? So E106 is really good because I think, well, it's not E101 or E102, which can be bad disk drives or incorrectly paired disk drives. This should be just a straight up OSU install, and we would be making a nice profit if that is the case. Right, troubleshoot, offline system update. So tell me, why did you get all the way through? Because it done all the flashing, everything. Do you know what? I cleaned the disk. I didn't initialize it. I'm sure you're meant to initialize. Not map, but I'm sure you're meant to initialize. These can actually be quite finicky. When I first started fixing Xbox One S's a couple of years ago, there's a YouTuber called Andrew Paul, and he has such good information on Xbox installations when it comes to their software. So OSU 1, it's called OSU 1 Operating System Update. Offline System Update. And he had some great guides. But what I will say is that there were so many different ways of actually installing OSU 1. Some Xboxes would work one way, and other Xboxes would work another. So you kind of try to master the different ways of installing OSU 1. I think I need to just initialize this disk is probably what I need to do. I'll plug it in and see if it's got the partitions. If it's got the partitions, I don't know what's going to happen. It's got the contents, it's got the partitions, it's got the partitions. There's a couple of things I need to try. The first one, I'm going to clean this disk because it could be the drive, who knows. I'm going to clean the disk. I'm going to replace the front board. So you can install OSU 1 by holding down the start button, the eject button, and the sync button at the same time, and wait for, I want to say 3 beeps. First beep is on, second beep is safe mode, third beep is installing the software. So you can do that. I'm going to try that because, believe it or not, those little differences make a massive change when it comes to installing this stuff. Very much like the sync button that we don't have. This power button is gone. What's actually interesting is that the console will usually fail at 2 points. The first one is straight away when you go to install OSU 1, it usually falls over and fails. If it doesn't fail at that point, the next point that it fails is when the disk drive is different at like 69%. Those are the 2 where it fails. This didn't fail at neither of those points. I'm pretty sure it finished the restart for the disk drive, carried on working, got right to the end, and then failed. Lord only knows what this is going to be. It could be absolutely anything. Could be something that we're not able to fix, but because it's E106, I've got faith. Unallocated, but initialized, perfect. Eject. Also need to make sure the caddy's okay, because that can be an issue sometimes. But I feel like in that scenario, it wouldn't start, let alone get near the end. So I think we can write off the caddy. All right, and now this is going to be difficult. Oh, the only other thing that it could be is that OSU 1 is outdated. I'm sure they do it once a month, because it could be that. But again, I thought it just wouldn't start if that were the case, but could be wrong. There we go. Okay. And now we wait. Okay, there's another beep. I'm just a little bit confused as to why it's gone into 720p of 480p, if I'm honest with you. That's kind of thrown me off a little bit because it wasn't doing that before, was it? It was 1080p. So it's moving now. If this doesn't work, I think my next thing to do is try a different drive. I might update OSU 1 first and then try this drive. There we go. See that? Fuming! I need to walk it off. I need to walk it off because I've got 47 IQ. I've downloaded OSU 1 already. Troubleshoot. There we go. Please go to the next bit. Okay, cool. Think, Joey, think. OSU 1 updated. 2 different hard drives used. I've replaced the board to try and boot it normally, as in boot into OSU 1 to install that way. I think I'm going to have to partition the drive. HDD master. I'm going to have to partition the drive the old school way. I'm going to have to do this the old school way. So I'm going to turn the Xbox off. The only time where I've personally had this work in the past is whereby you've gone to launch OSU 1 on the console and it's failed straight away. That's the only time because you need to manually create the partitions. So I don't think this is going to work, but I am going to manually create the partitions on the drive. That's the next logical step, right? That's been completed. Now we can eject the drive. So eject. Now we have the partitions. There is no reason, technically, why this shouldn't work. It's getting past the drive as well, so the disk drive part of it. So I know that the disk drive itself is probably the correct one. I hope so anyway. Okay. Right, good. It's doing its thing. Okay, right. Oh, different hard drive cable. Manually partition the drive. Tried selecting to install OSU on safe mode. Tried forcing OSU 1 installation via button panels. I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else that we can do with this, because again, this screams some sort of internal issue. It's doing almost all of the installation and failing right at the end, so it's not happy with something at the end. So all of those like connection issues that we have are kind of out the door because it begins to write to the drive. So I don't think it's anything to do with pretty much any of the fixes we've tried. I thought maybe, no, again, OSU 1 being updated, I think that would have thrown an error pretty much straight away.
Use a different USB stick, Joey.
Well, I'm using an SSD at the moment. I mean, it's not a horrendous shout. I bought these from Amazon, Simax data storage. There we go. I think we're going to have to call it quits on this one. It's done the exact same thing. It comes up E106, unfortunately not working. There's obviously so much time and effort that I can put into a £25 Xbox One S to make maybe another £25 profit. I have no idea what it really boils down to, so if anyone has an idea in the comments section, please leave a comment down below. Let's move on to item number 2 and see if that can save us from the depths. Joey, how much did you pay for this faulty PlayStation 5? I have no idea. I am going to check because I've got about 5 PS5s at the moment and I need to pair them up with the actual eBay listings that I have. And I do that by looking at the marks and scuffs. Okay, so I paid a total of, I think, because there's no pictures in the description of this eBay listing, it is simply just a stock picture of a PlayStation 5. I paid a total of £140 for this digital PlayStation 5. Now, interestingly enough, we've got a sticker at the top and also a sticker at the bottom of the console as well. The model number of this console is it's a 1016B, all right? So it's not brand new, it's also not ridiculously old. Is the warranty sticker intact? Because that is straight away going to make our percentage chance of being able to fix this deduct by about 50%. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, okay. Well, it's not a good start. So as we can see, the sticker has been lifted. The sticker's been lifted. This has been removed and not put back. So I think the description of the device on eBay was a blod. So hopefully, again, we can line that up with this PlayStation being the accurate one. So let me plug in the power and see if we've got a blod. I didn't hear any crackle there, surprisingly. 3, 2, 1. Oh, this is straight up no power. This is going to be an interesting one. I don't know where it's... So, I don't know where this has come from. I don't know how much I paid. Let's get this taken apart then, because it has no power, which is a nice fault to have. I'm going to say it. No power is a nice fault to have. I still need to magnetize this. A lot of people were saying about I need to magnetize. Do you prefer Xbox or PlayStation consoles to fix? I was speaking about this the other day. I don't mind. I'd say probably preference is PS5. Okay, power button's connected. That was one of the first things I just wanted to check. Also, fun fact, so I seem to be missing the little bit for the SSD down here. Have they taken out? They've taken this out as well. Now, why does that bother me? So when it comes to the LED cable being taken out, it usually means that they've lifted up the console to check the power supply. So that's where my logic and head goes straight off the bat. So let me just take this. And all of these cables have been ripped as well, which means that they've taken out the antenna. I think they've taken the board out. Yeah, I think they've definitely tried to fix it. So it's going to be really interesting. When you fix something that another tech's been inside of before, the dopamine hit doubles. It's really nice. I don't mind liquid metal. Once you know how to like kind of sort it out with IPA and cotton swabs and stuff, I don't actually mind it. I hate it from a perspective of, yeah, if it goes everywhere, it can cause a lot of issues. The first thing we're going to do on this console is going to be a visual inspection. I'll check to make sure we've got 12 volts coming out of the power supply. I think that's probably a more basic check first, but second thing, sorry, we're going to do is have a look over the board and make sure that we haven't got any liquid metal spills, for example. Well, how does it look on the face of it? I can see some grubby fingerprints here. Can I see any signs of flux? I can. I can see flux on the back of the retimer. So if I kind of angle the board up and zoom the camera in, can you see little bits of flux here? Can you see that? That stood out to me straight away. HDMI port has been changed. Doesn't look to be enough solder there on the other side of the on this side of the board. It's not a bad amount. I'm assuming that's gone through to the other side, but we'll find out. Guys, I'm going to be very optimistic and I'm going to say that we're fixing this. Right, DC voltage, here we go. 3, 2, 1. 12 Vs. Cool. So we've got 12 volts. Nice stuff. Oh, whilst I'm here, if I've got 12 volts, I think we might have a 5 volt short because they've messed around with the retimer. So I'm going to say we got a 5 volt short, but I could be wrong. Do we have 5 Vs? We have 5 Vs. Do we have 3? We got 3.3. Okay. So we're more than likely looking at potentially a bad fuse or something, which would be a win. I mean, if I stumbled across this PS5 today, it's faulty and there is a faulty capacitor, I need this. I need this win. Liquid metal? Okay. That's dry. Do you know what? That's dry, but that is also a sign that somebody just has not put that back correctly, because I can see that there's loose parts of liquid metal around there. That's not a natural dry spot, as we say. Oh man, what's going on? Why? What am I seeing? Can you see what's happening in this shot? If anybody can see what's happening in this shot, because I can see it, you've passed level 1. What's missing here? It's just out of shot. I'll give you that clue. It's just out of shot. Look what's missing. The blooming BIOS. The BIOS chip is missing. Why is the BIOS missing? Who does that? Who takes off the BIOS? Luckily, this is a digital edition console. So what I should be able to do is put a BIOS on with the revision of the board, which is the 010, by the way, and we should be okay. I actually need to visually check over the board under the scope to make sure I don't have any missing components, because if the BIOS chip is missing, what other components have they used as like a potential donor board, you know? I love eBay so much. It's full of untold stories, you know? And you have to piece them all together. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any cracks on the corner of this APU, to be honest, because usually that's a signal of a blod and a console that turns on and then turns off with a fan spin. So again, I'm just checking around all the obvious areas. So they've definitely replaced the retimer from what I can tell. I'm just going to make sure, oh, have they? Is this just, oh, okay, so this is flux from the HDMI port. Now, I'll be honest with you, again, you guys know I'm always honest, and as I like to give positive criticism, I guess, right? The HDMI cap missing isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not good practice, but it's there as protection, right? So the console will work without that capacitor. Nonetheless, it's good practice to make sure it's on. The diode is missing as well, the big diode. We're missing two caps, actually. We're missing a cap from here, and we're missing a cap from here. We're missing a diode from here. They've obviously burnt the plastic, not an issue. The port itself, honestly, isn't horrendous because the solder's managed to come all the way through the board and actually secure around the legs. It's not the finish that I would like to have on my ports, whereby we get that little mountain rise on the legs themselves. The pins, it just looks a bit fluxy, so it needs a clean. This could have intermittent issues with the HDMI port and the HDMI cable, as we are all very familiar with. But it's not a horrendous port. They've left a lot of flux, so they haven't cleaned up after they've finished, which is, which kind of sucks. Let me tell you what I think's happened. They've replaced this port. This isn't a case of they've replaced it and they've knocked off these components. They've used these components as donor components, in my opinion. So they've taken them from this board and they put them onto another board to ensure it's working. The reason I think that is because there's no clear signs of the components being knocked off here. It looks like they've been taken off, because sometimes what can happen is you can see solder marks have been spread a little bit left and right. These have been very clearly, I think, removed from the board, as well as the fact this bit of plastic being so burnt is probably because they've tried to get this diode off, perhaps. They've aimed the heat this way, the flux has gone this way, and they've removed this diode for a donor. All right. So I don't think it's necessarily someone with inexperience. I think it is more so a case of they've taken it off to use those components elsewhere. And again, this isn't a bad job on the back of the board. This is a competent enough looking and working HDMI port replacement if those other components hadn't been taken off as a donor. It just needs a real big clean. Like I said, you might stumble across intermittent issues where there is a lot of flux and it causes an issue with the actual HDMI cable itself. But if we look at the legs of the port, the solder's gone through, so it is going to be a strong port. However, again, it's not my personal finish, where I like to make sure there is enough solder just in these little cracks here. But again, it doesn't have to be. This is just more of a visual look for me, and that's my preferred signature leave, if that makes sense, just to make the job look a little bit nicer. Have they taken any components off the back behind the chip? No, it doesn't look like it. I think the flux again is just maybe trickled down from the HDMI area, so that's interesting. They didn't leave enough flux on here to actually discolor the copper. And then if we turn it over on the back, one thing I've just noticed is we don't have a US port. So we're actually missing a USB port as well, which is really interesting. I have no doubts in my mind that this was a donor board. I've been sold a donor board for £140, I think. That's interesting, hey? We're going to start by replacing this chip. Has the South Bridge been replaced? No. And do you know why I'm saying no? Is because there's no flux around it. Now, judging by this person's work, I can tell by their craft and the way they work that they tend to leave flux on the board. So if they were to have changed the South Bridge, we'd see a lot of a messier South Bridge, So I don't think this South Bridge has been changed. Is that liquid metal? I think it is. I think that is liquid metal. Let me just scrape that up first. Do we have liquid metal underneath the South Bridge is the question. I don't think so. There is a little shiny spot there, but I don't think it's gone under there. We'll find out anyway. So the way that I'm now going to see if there's any liquid metal in this area is I'm just going to take the dry side. Can you see now that that's spreading? So this is a little bit of liquid metal here. So again, we just kind of scoopy doop. And again, I'll check. I can't see any more smudging. So I'm going to take an exact replica of this BIOS chip from a 010. Now, I don't think it really matters, to be honest. If you've worked on these boards, you will understand that sometimes you can take off these chips very easily, other times not so easily, and it can take a lot of heat and airspeed to get them off. So what I like to do, low melt would be the option, but you're right, it's not going to be low melt, it's going to be leaded, just to bring down that melting temperature. Now, what I'm also going to do here, I shouldn't have applied the flux, by the way. It was done with me. I should have warmed the board up first, because this donor board has been sat around for a while in my room and it's relatively cold in here. So I'm just going to put a drop of heat in the board. It doesn't really matter about the flux situation here because this is a donor board. Fume extractor on, guys, because health is wealth. Let's grab our little CH314Z4362 chip reader. Okay, so I'm just going to, again, put some heat into the board. This is the board that we're working on, and we can see there's a little bit of flux there. But I'm just going to ignore that for the second. I'll clean it up once the IC's gone on. And pin 1 is in the top right. So we'll go ahead and put the IC that we've just written to, the BIOS, onto here. So now the board is a little bit warmer. It should make our lives a tad easier. So I'm going to go 450 degrees Celsius here. Airflow speed, I'm going to go for a 99% to start. I'm just going to wait for that solder to... Actually, I'll tell you what I'm going to do before I do that. Again, board's warm. Let's come in with some more flux. And really quickly add some leaded to these pads. I'm not using the Hacko here, I'm using the Metcal. So just a little bit of leaded. Make sure these are nice and shiny. They look 10 times better. There we go. Before I then go ahead and put down the chip, because I've just added that, I am going to come in with a little bit of a clean, just to make it look a little bit more presentable, especially underneath the chip. Again, this isn't needed. Like, this is just my way of doing things. I think it's more so like a case of, I just like to know that there's not going to be any issues underneath, you know? Right, so that BIOS chip is now on. And again, I'm just going to replace a couple of components around the HDMI port itself. I'm probably, if I'm honest with you guys, going to take this port off anyway. I'm not going to do that now, because if there is an event of me being able to test on a white light, I will do that before replacing. So here we have the diode in question. And again, I'm changing this port, guys, so I'm not really too fussed about the burning situation that we're probably going to have on the plastic. Just want to make sure that if I'm able to test the picture, even though it's not going to be pretty, I'll be able to. I'm just putting the heat on this now, making sure it's melted properly. There we go. See that? Okay, so that's good. We are missing the cap as well. I don't know if the cap is vital, but I'll put that on. I don't think it is. I think this cap is also protection. I'm not talking about the one that goes underneath the port or near the actual pins. I'm talking about the one that goes next to the diode, not the resistor, the cap. This little one here. So I'm just going to put this one on just in case. I don't think it's going to be anything to do with the display working necessarily. Now it looks like it's in a tombstone, so I'll just hold it there in place, and I'm going to readjust. So it's definitely soldered into place now. I'll come back in with a little bit of heat and try and push it down. I am, like I said, a bit shaky today. Let's add a tiny bit of flux. Lower the airspeed as well. So I'll put it down to about 40%. Come back in and just see if I can get that properly on. See it tombstoning. There it is, perfect. Okay, and then we'll wait for that to cool down a sec, and then we'll do a poll as well to see if you guys think this is going to work or not, just from me replacing the BIOS. I can confirm as well, UART has not been done with this device, so I can confirm that. Doesn't look it anyway. So again, this port had a lot of flux around it. I'm not going to worry about that too much now. I will give it a quick cotton swab whilst the board is hot. Again, guys, the best way to clean flux is when the board is warm. It's as simple as that. Always, 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 always. When the board is warm, clean flux. You guys know I don't even really like to use that much IPA until the flux is gone. So I like to use a microfiber as well. There we go. Now that looks a lot less fluxy. There is still flux in that port, but it looks less fluxy. We've replaced that small cap. We replaced the diode. There's no components missing around the retimer, so I don't think that's going to affect anything. I will quickly check the No, I'm not going to check for shorts. I'm just going to yellow it and see what happens. So, how do you clean liquid metal, Joey? I'll show you guys, because I know that a lot of people can struggle with it. I'm going to apply some IPA on a cotton swab. What I'm then going to do is grab all of the liquid metal and push it onto the die. You can group it up, that's fine, and then push it onto the die as well. So we group it up, push it onto the die, and we're just going to put all of it in the middle as one singular blob. Alright, just keep going all the way around until you are satisfied that you've got as much as you possibly can. You're not going to get every single 0.millimeter dot worth of liquid metal. It's not going to happen. But if you're just patient and put it all into the center, you'll do a good enough job, okay? So that's our liquid metal. What we do now, there's a couple of different things we can do. Me personally, if I look at the die and go, that's a little bit oxidized, I'll put some more IPA and I'll just go around the die, because I can just push the blob around. Instead of having to soak it up and reapply it, I can just keep the blob on. Now this die is actually fine. It doesn't need a proper clean. It is in good condition. So I now bin that cotton swab. I get another cotton swab. I give it a blow to make sure the IPA is dry. And now I just repurpose the liquid metal that I pushed into the middle. People say liquid metal is very expensive. Well, I've had the same tube of liquid metal since my first tube that I bought, because you can reuse it, repurpose it, and it's still a full tube, and you need to give it a decent amount of pressure, and that is how I resurface the liquid metal, okay? And I do exactly the same. It's easier, obviously, because you don't have to worry about components and stuff, on the die for the chassis. Right, should we test? I don't think it's going to work. 3, 2, 1. Oh! Does it go... pleasantly surprised. Does it go to a white light? Still got faith. Yeah! Let's go. I don't know why somebody would have used this as a donor board if we get a white light. Is it going to be a board that perhaps there is just no possible way of us getting out? First things first, we need to take the port out of the board. And the best way to do that is I can lay this because it's got a lean, right? So I can literally lay this flat on my bench right here. I come in with the heat. I'm going to blast it 480 degrees Celsius, airflow speed 99%. Don't necessarily need to as well because of the fact this has been worked on and most probably has leaded solder. I personally like to come in with a solder sucker, so a pop. What you have to be careful is that you don't suck up components. I could also, if I wanted to, just leave the solder in here and add more solder, but I don't know what solder the other person has used. So I'm going to come back in 480 degrees and I'm going to clear out the holes just to make sure. So let's clear out this one. There we go. And now we'll clear the other two as well. It's where you have to be careful because you've got a tiny diode and a cap. Should be okay. If not, we can replace them. Simple as that. Good practice. Handful of times I can tell you that I've knocked a component. Maybe 2 times, 2, 3 times. There we go. That's clear. Let's flip the board over. Bring it to our side. Hopefully we've got no... What is that? See, look, this is why it's really... I don't know if that's flux or not. This is why it's really, really good to maybe just do your own work on these sorts of boards. And again, if this was a board that had a standard port in, just a factory one, I'd just add leaded here, but I'm not going to do that because it's because somebody else has worked on it. I don't know what their leaded is doing, as we can see from whatever's been left behind on the board. It might look like just a little bit of dried flux or something, but you never know. So what I'll do is come in and just make sure I clean up whatever solder they've got on those pads, and I'll come in with some fresh leaded. And then we're going to get our cotton swab. Again, board's hot. Don't need to use IPA right now. And the first thing we're going to do is add leaded solder, a bunch of it. Flux here, flux here, flux here, flux here, flux here. Come in with our leaded. My voice is starting to go a little bit, I apologise. And we're just going to hold the iron down, wait for that solder to drop through, and do the exact same here. And now there is nothing wrong with flooding these with solder because we can always tidy up. If you put less, it's more difficult. So you'd rather have more, in my personal opinion. There we go. There's enough solder there now. And then just a quick bop over. Looks good. And now again, a wipe. Always cleaning up our flux. That's a big blob. We have a little bit of a bridge there. Not a problem. Come back in. Clean up the flux as we go. I always like to tidy as I go. Just makes the job easier to clean up afterwards. We grab a cap. I actually have some of these caps. Oh, did I put them back in the box? That's the question. PS5 HDMI cap. Yep, I put them back in the box. And then I'm probably just going to go a quick 480. Stick this on. So I'm just going to rotate it around a little bit. Solder's molten. Drop that there. Hold it. Don't let go. Come off the heat. And now wiggle. Yep, solidify. Little knock. Good. Come in with a tiny bit of flux again, just to make sure we're all okay. We're going to just really quickly lower the airspeed to about 40% because I don't want flux going everywhere on the board. And I'm just going to simply reflow that component and you'll see it bump into place. As long as I've got enough solder on the other pad as well. It's definitely enough on the left. I think I might need a tiny little bit of solder to the right of the component. But again, I'm just going to wait for it to dry. I don't want it to be too hot. It's still really, really hot at the moment, so I have to be careful because I don't want this cap coming up now. Yeah, I think that's okay. Give it a quick clean. Make sure we're all good. Oh no, we're not all good. The ceramic off the cap is broke. So we get another one. It's there, look. Can you see? Can you see the ceramics come off the end of it? That's annoying. So I need to get another one. I don't know if that's a bad cap or not because I wasn't even heating from that side. So that's unfortunate. Wait for this to dry because if I wipe this now, the solder's coming up. Alright, now we should be able to give this a little bit of a clean. There we go. Okay, cap's solid. Tin our port. Flux. Spread it out. A little bit of solder on the end of the iron. Don't really need much for this at all. Wait for it to get up to temp, and then just a quick tin like that. Make sure you haven't got any bridges. I mean, the make sure you haven't got any bridges part is kind of really depends, because they sort themselves out when you solder the HDMI port to the actual board itself. We'll come in with the PS5 board. I'm going to hang this over the edge of my desk, okay? And I personally like to just spread it out. Again, that's a me thing. 480 degrees Celsius with an airflow speed of 99%. I mean, it's a lot easier to just drop the port on with your fingers. But it's not something I'm really going to recommend when you're first trying to do this, because I don't want you to burn yourself. I'd probably recommend tweezers, because tweezers, you kind of lose that precision. You can still do it, but I mean, I personally find it easier just to drop it on with my thumb and my forefinger. All right, there we go. Can you see it starting to wet now? I want to make sure that the pads in the middle are wet, okay? But there we go. Everything is glistening. It's ready to be dropped. Come in with the port. Drop it on like that. Move the heat back and forth. Now, I can't personally see. I haven't got an angle on this board to be able to see the pins themselves. So I kind of have to guesstimate this, right? But what I am going to do is jiggle the port around. I always do this because it helps the solder move up the legs. And also it helps create a bond between the pins of the board, of the port and the actual board. Now, I think that is going to be okay where it is. So I'm just going to hold the heat a little bit longer until I can start to see solder creep up those legs. If in the event that I can't see that, then I do like to come in with a little bit of leaded solder, just making sure that that's come up. I think it's come up the sides enough, either side, maybe not the back side. So I'm going to come in here with my leaded, and it's going to knock it out of position. That's fine. We'll deal with it. And just put a little extra bit just there, a little extra bit at the front. I'll go the other side as well, because why not, if I'm here. Drop a little bit here, and a little bit here. Cool. And now again, make sure that's back in position. If I knock the port forward a bit, I can see roughly where it is. That's okay. I'm not pushing down on the port. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on what day it is. I'm just going to wait for that to cool for a second, because if I move it too quick and it's still wet, we're going to have issues. I'm going to clean the flux. That's the first thing I do. Come in with a cotton swab. I'm just going to clean the flux around the port. No IPA, because I don't want the IPA spreading around flux underneath the port. So I just come in with my cotton swab and dry this up as much as I can. And now if we check, that's what we're dealing with. Yeah? I like to try and keep things as clean as I possibly can. Look, sometimes flux will get in the port. It will happen. Now, I had a video recently, actually. We had this exact same issue, and I was working on a PS5 for ages and ages and ages, and it turned out to be, I don't think it was flux in the port. I think something else was shorting something out inside the port. But we can see here that it looks like a very, very clean new port. And you see no bridges, and there's hardly any flux under there. There's little glistens. You can see little glistens here at the back. But yeah, it's a nice clean port. Now, noticeably, like I said, look at the legs. Can you see how the solder has come through? As well as with the addition of me putting some leaded solder. Now, what I'd actually recommend is it's really tough to do that as a beginner. Put solder in something whilst you're hovering a heat gun. It's so difficult. So don't focus on that when you start. Focus on just getting the port on. Now, if I turn this around, there's probably going to be big blobs on the back, but we like big blobs because we can sort them out. A little bit of flux. Tiny bit to start with, because board's going to get hot and it's going to evaporate everywhere anyway, followed by a good reflow of that solder. Now, the back of that port looks really nice, in my opinion. Now, I'm missing the USB port that we're going to sort next. And again, this is a job for Sarah, the standard. Obviously, I've got a white light now, so there is a reason why I'm replacing this port. So we're going to come in here with 480 degrees Celsius, 99% airflow, ready to melt all of this. So I'm just going to hold the heat. I'm not going to rush this. There's no point in rushing it. Could I add leaded? Most definitely. Adding leaded here would be good, but sometimes it doesn't mix properly. There we go. So there's one. I'm just going to go through slowly and surely. And now what I need to do is actually get a donor. But again, same rules apply. 480 degrees Celsius, 99% airflow. And here we have a USB-A port. So now we grab the other board that we're going to be putting it on, and we simply place it in like that. So we can see now, yeah, that's pushed flush against the board, and we solder it. Now it's good to hold the port with one finger whilst I tin my iron, and I'll show you why. If we go ahead and add some flux, I'm going to usually add it to like a grounding point here. And I'm going to make sure the connector is nice and flush. Now you have to be quick here, to be honest. So I've just soldered that quickly. Alright, so you can see in the top left it's now soldered. And now what I'll do is I'll come through. Whilst the board is hot, I like to move quick whilst the board is warm. with more flux. Thing is as well, you don't want to put too much on, because when you put too much on, it can go through the other side and bind 2 pins together. So you do have to be careful. Cool. And now what I'll do is come through with my brush and some IPA. So all of those are soldered. Okay, there's a little bit of a blob there, one that I talked about. So I'm going to sort that out real quick. And if this doesn't clear it, I'm going to put some heat into the board. But the Hakko should do an okay job of this. So I've upgraded this to the Hakko now instead of having the Metcal, because it's a bigger tip. So I'm trying to get a bit more surface cover with that tip. It's definitely soldered, and I think I've just sucked up what looks to be the big blob. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. IPA and the toothbrush, followed by the microfiber. Just dabbing, by the way. I never scrape the microfiber. I might give it a little 1-2 here or there, but for the most part, I'm dabbing. Now, that port is fine. We want to make sure that the ground connections are going to be okay. Are the solder blobs a little bit high? Yeah. Does it matter? No, absolutely not. And the port is not going to be going absolutely anywhere. 3, 2, 1. Okay, white light. Are we going to get 3 beeps, or is it going to be okay? Because I have performed open heart surgery on it. Let's go! Nice. I need to know if the ports work, obviously, the USB ports. So I need to make sure that we can read the data in the ports. I don't know what the issue was with this. It could be very well that maybe it crashes with games. So I'm going to put it back together and just give it a little bit of a test to make sure it's okay. You can see that there's games on it, so it might require like small updates, but shouldn't be anything major. As you can see here, I'm testing out some Astro's Playroom and everything seems to be okay. We didn't have any crashing whatsoever. Ooh, USBs. I'm going to try a random one at the back. I don't know which one's which ones that I've replaced, so I'm just going to try both of them, obviously. That's one. So that's one on the back. And then the other one. So this is 3 for 3. Are we 3 for 3? Yes, we are. There we go, guys. So we have successfully managed to fix this PS5 Digital Edition console, and it turns out to be a nice cushy little profit. Bearing in mind we paid, I think anyway, £140 for this. Should be able to sell it close to Christmas, maybe around about the 230, 240 sort of mark. So nice little profit. Well, I think I just got extremely lucky with that PS5, if I'm brutally honest. I played it last night for around about 45 minutes or so, and I didn't get any crashing or anything. So I'm pretty sure and confident that it's working 100%. So why would somebody have taken all of those parts off as a donor? I have no idea. At least hopefully that will be enough to win us a nice little profit. And I can in fact confirm I found the listing for that PS5 and it was what I thought, £140. Let's head on over to Sally's spectacular spreadsheet to total everything up. So we had an Xbox One S and a digital PS5. £25.38 was the total cost for the Xbox One S, and the PS5 £140. Fun fact, the Xbox One S faulty has already sold, and we didn't go through eBay. So postage was £3.99. Estimated sale price, I would have put it up for 20 quid, but we managed to get £25 for the console, meaning we only made a loss of £4.37 with that Xbox One S. So I'm quite happy with that, if I'm honest with you. Now the digital PS5 I'm going to list for £230, and hopefully it sells relatively quickly. And because I can't update 15, 16 and 17 yet, I would say as well, I actually spent 4 hours on both of these consoles because it was over the course of 2 streams, and the estimated profit is £40 and 14 pence. So at least it's a profit, right? We're still at an actual total profit of 470. Our estimated is 382. So I think this will eventually bump up once we sell some things. Thank you very much for watching, and a big fat Merry Christmas. Make sure to eat a bunch of food and create amazing memories with your family and friends. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. I'll leave a playlist up here so you can start from the very beginning. Have a great rest of your day, week, weekend, whatever it is for you, and I shall see you as always in the next one. Peace.